In this video I'm going to show you how to use the Wavelength Photoshop action. So I'm going to use this photo here in the tutorial. Going to be playing the action to recreate this effect. So the way the action works is that we firstly specify an area over our photo that we want all the lines to start growing out from, and we then choose a direction, left, right, up or down, and play the action, and then it will create all these lines and all these forms and shoot out in the direction that we choose. So I've got a few more examples I'll just quickly click through here. So that there is the up direction, and that one there is the down direction. And what we can also do with the action is just use the lines. If you just want to use the lines, there's an option to do that, which I'll show you how to do. So I'll just close these down now and start off with the photo. So there's a few things we just need to check off before we run the action. Just make sure you don't run into any errors. So firstly, look into your layer panel, and we need to make sure that your photo layer is set as the background. So if it looks like this, if it looks identical to that, then you're fine. But if it doesn't, there's a step you need to do. So for example, if I opened up my photo and it looks like this, you just need to go to Layer, New, Background from Layer. Just sets it as the background. Now, still in the Layer panel, go to the top right hand corner icon, go to Panel Options, right down the bottom here, make sure Add Copy to Copy Layers and Groups is ticked. Click OK. Next, go to Image Mode, make sure you're in RGB color mode and 8 bits a channel. Alright, and just make sure, if you just go to Image Size, try working with a high resolution photo and avoid using photos under 1000 pixels, just because the quality of the effects isn't as great as a high resolution photo. So, alright, now what I want to do firstly is extend the canvas out to the right some more, because I want to play this action and have all the effects grow out to the right. So at the moment there's just not enough room. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Image, Canvas Size, and because I want to extend out to the right, I'll click this arrow here. So we're going to add more room to the right here, and I'm going to add 2000 pixels just so we've got a lot of room, just like that. Now what I want to do also is extend this gradient here over all this white, because it just doesn't look that great as a background, this action. So I'm just going to hit M on the keyboard, grab the marquee tool, and I'm just going to draw a box around here. And I'm going to hit Control T or Command T, and I'm just going to scale that part of the image out to the right to fill that in. Enter, deselect. Okay, so now that's looking a bit better. What we need to do next is create a new layer. So go to Layer, New Layer, and it must be called Brush, B-R-U-S-H, whoops, and all in lowercase, no uppercase letters. Click OK. So with this layer selected, we need to specify the areas of the photo that we want to start growing all those lines out from. So what I recommend, what you can do, whatever method you want to use to select your photo, do that. But for this action, I wouldn't recommend brushing a small area like that. What you should do is outline all of your subject. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab the Magic Wand tool, and I'm just going to make a really, select the background. I'm just going to make a really quick selection around my photo. Just like that. That will do. I need to invert that selection. So I'll go Control Shift I or Command Shift I, and I'll select the brush layer. Now if I hit Alt Delete or Option Delete on a Mac, I'll fill that selection with the foreground color here. just like that. So now I've highlighted all my subject. There's a few little bits I'm just going to erase here, I can see. And I'm just going to brush in, just going to fill in this selection a bit better. Okay, just like that. And the reason why, I'll explain to you after the action's finished why I recommend to trace around all your subject. It's because we've got more control then over where we want those lines to go out from. But for this one, I definitely don't want the lines to appear over the face. So I'm just going to erase, grab a soft brush, I'm just going to erase around the face here, just like that. And that's now ready to go. So let's light up the actions panel, go to window actions. Now go to this top right hand corner icon, go to load actions, select wavelengths.atn, and it will appear here. Select this drop down, hit this arrow here, and you reveal the directions. So I want to go to the right. Now if you want to see the playback of the action, just twirl this little arrow open, and then you've got this scroll bar here, so you can see all the commands there. And you just click play on the action. That's it. The action runs for around 3 minutes. It will depend on the speed of your computer. So just play the action and come back to Photoshop in a few minutes time and it will be done. Now I'm just going to fast forward this video to get to the result, and then just going to talk about what every single layer does and a few customization techniques. Okay, the action's stopped and there it's created the entire effect for me. So I'm just going to minimize the actions panel because we're done with that for the moment, and look into the layer panel. Now with any one of my actions, you might already know this already, but when the action stops, what you want to do firstly is collapse all these folders so the workflow is all neatened up. So if you just hold down Control Alt or Command Option on a Mac, and with the wavelength folder selected, just click on that arrow, and what that'll do, it just minimizes all the folders, so it's all neat. So yeah, just remember that with this action, every time you run it, this arrangement of lines and the way it weaves in and out of each other, that's going to be completely different every time you run the action. So even if you use the same brushed area, the result is going to be different again. Okay, so you can run the action multiple times and save each Photoshop file out and then reopen them all and see which one you like the best. Okay, so from the top here, I've got the brush layer on. I've kept that around, so if you want to run the action again, just delete these two folders, then click play. Okay, so I'll hide that. I'll come back to the adjustments folder. That's basically got a whole heap of color options and ways we can fine tune the look of the design. So we'll go into the wavelength folder now, and what I'm going to do is turn off all these layers, and I'm just going to start from the bottom, go through them one by one so you understand how it all works. Now this bottom folder here is completely optional. It's straight lines, so if you turn that one on, it will generate just straight lines, so they won't be wavy like the default result. So by default it's off, but the option's there if you want it. And if you go inside, there's a few excuse me, there's a few different layers. So the bottom one here just creates that effect, but the ones above are the lines, just like that, and they're different thicknesses and in slightly different positions, so you can turn multiple ones on, play around with that. So that's there if you want it. Main area fill, if I turn that one on, that one generates 90% of the look, this folder here. So, and there's two main layers that create the effect. So I'll just turn this top one off and start off at the bottom. So all this one is, it's basically a duplicate of this bottom layer here, the base, and I'll turn it off, turn one back on, and it's got a wave effect applied to it. So that's that. Now this one here, main fill 1, if I turn that one on, that's the layer that creates that weaving effect, the way it weaves in and out of each other, and I'll show you how that works. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hide this mask on this layer. So if I hold down shift and click on that, I can hide that layer. Now if I turn this one on and off, you can see that this bottom layer here, main fill 2, has that wave effect going that way, and if I turn this one on, it's going the opposite direction. And so the way it sort of weaves in and out of each other, it's done through this mask. So I'll turn it back on. So if I go into this mask, and if I hold down Alt or Option on a Mac and click on that mask to go inside, you can see that everywhere where there's white is where that layer will appear, and everywhere it's black it won't appear. So if I hold down Control or Command Option, or Command on a Mac, and click on that mask to select it, you can now see where those waves end. So you can see, if you just look around those marching ants, you can see where those waves stop, and that's how it's creating that weaving effect. So what you can also do with this layer is, if you select the mask, you can play around with moving it around, so you can change the position of where it weaves in and out, or you could zoom out and maybe scale it. So just hit Control T or Command T, scale that up and down. We can rotate it. So just experiment with that, because you can get some cool results playing around with that one. So what have I done? I'm just going to undo that, turn that back on. Now these two adjustment layers sitting on top of these two layers, you can just recolor those elements. So if you double click on that, you can play around with the Q slider to color that particular layer. So you could color that one that color, and you can double click on this one and then change the color there as well. So that option's there, and I'll turn them off. Okay, so that's the main area fill folder. Now the next layer up, photo displays, if I turn that one on, I'll turn it on and off, and you can clearly see what that's doing. It's creating that effect where the lines actually roll over the top of the area that we defined, the brushed area. So you can see that there. Now it will only sort of roll around the edges of the area that we defined. So it's pretty smooth throughout the middle, but you notice that it dips away at the end of the the edges of where we brushed. So keep that in mind where you're brushing, that it will create that that displacement effect around the edges. Now I've just got this one above it called PD color, or photo displays color. If you wanted to, you can just use that layer to color that specific area over the photo. Okay. Now these 4 layers, lines, I'm just going to turn them all on at once. So they're the subtle lines that you see running throughout all those waves. So now one thing to keep in mind with these 4 layers, what you want to play around with, is that if you look at their blend mode and opacity, it's only set to 30%, and the blend mode is set to screen, so it's actually quite soft. So if you shift select these 4 layers and move your mouse over the word opacity, click and drag to the right, you can turn that opacity up to 100, or even down to 0, and slowly drag to the right to increase the opacity, like that. So yeah, just experiment with that. I might just turn it up a little bit. Or what you can also do is, if you've selected multiple layers, and if I just hit 5 on the keypad, changes the opacity of all those layers to 50%. So I can just hit numbers on the keypad like 6, 60%, 7. You can play around with the opacity that way. I'll just leave it at 50%. You can also change the blend mode. You might want to just have it at normal, and then maybe turn it up to 100%, so it's much more subtle. It's still there. So yeah, I'll just keep this at screen at 50%. So this one here, unmasked lines, what I'll do, I'll turn all these off again, and I'll turn this one on. So if you just want to use the lines on their own, so this bottom layer this bottom folder, we had straight lines. I'll turn that one off, those on. So there's straight lines. and if you want to use the wavy lines, turn that one on, unmask lines, so you can see that the lines wrap around our subject and they're wavy as they extend off to the right. If you go inside here, there's a few different layers. So this bottom one by default is turned off. It doesn't really wrap around the subject, so it just glides over the top, so you can use that one. And then these three basically duplicates of each other, but the waves are slightly offset, so it creates that offset effect there. You can just use one layer if you want. You can also maybe duplicate them, so just select a layer, hit Control J, and you can play around with the waves a bit more. You can go to Filter, Distort, Wave, and play around with all these settings here. Don't know what this is going to create. Okay, you can move them around, create a much more detailed wavy effect. Just going to delete that. Okay, turn that one off, and I'll turn on all the default layers that were on after the action was finished. So we're back to the original look. So these three layers here are just some adjustment layers that you can use to refine the look of the waves. If you select the waves contrast layer, I've got in brackets opacity. Again, just move your mouse over the word opacity, click and drag to the left and right. You can increase the opacity of that layer. So you can see that adjusting the contrast there. So by default it was on about 60%, I think. So yeah, mess around with that one. You can change the brightness, double click. So yeah, there's that one there. Wave color saturation. If you double click on this one and drag the saturation handle, you can play around with the color saturation. You have desaturated. You can use this hue slider here to change all the colors at once. You could also go colorize and then drag the saturation up, and then again play around with that hue slider. And what you could also do is, say for example, I'll desaturate, set this desaturation down to here, but I only want, say, the right hand side half of all those waves to be saturated, but I want the area around my subject to be in full saturation. So what I can do is select the layer mask, and if I hit G on the keyboard, get the gradient tool out and make sure it's set to black and white, I can draw a gradient over that mask like that to reveal the original saturation, and you can see it blends to the saturation that we set in this layer. So basically I'm hiding, I am hiding half of this adjustment layer here with the mask. So if I double click on it, and might just move the side of it, if I now play around with the saturation, you notice it's only affecting that half of the design. So that's another way you can experiment with different colors. Alright, but I will just hide that. I'll just hide that layer, and okay, back to here again. Alright, so this next layer above is quite an important one, and I'll show you how it works. So what I'm going to do first is just hide the mask, and you'll notice if I hide the mask, it's hidden all or most of the lines that crossed over the area that we brushed. And all this layer is if I move it around, it's a cutout of the area that we defined, and I've put it on top. Okay, so if I hide this layer, you'll notice that all the lines now wrap completely over our subject. But what I've used this layer for is that we can actually define now where we want the waves to intersect with our subject, so we can get that effect of it weaving in and out. And that's done through the mask. So if I just click on this mask, you'll notice that the waves have appeared in random areas, but that's more of just a reminder to jump into this mask and fine tune it, because we can have complete control over that. So if I go inside this mask, just hold down Alt or Option on Mac again, click on it, you'll notice that all the areas in white is where that effect is going to appear, and all the areas in black is where it's not going to appear, but we can completely control that. So if I hit B on the keyboard, get the brush out. Now if I grab a white brush and start brushing over that photo, over that layer, I can erase all those effects. But if I grab a black brush, now brush on, I can brush them in. Okay. Now if you want to quickly switch between white and black, just hit X on the keyboard. You see my foreground and background color here. As I'm hitting X there, changing over. So what you can do is I just zoom in a bit here, hit B on the keyboard, you use the square brackets to adjust the size of the brush. You see that there? So now I've got the square brackets and I can hit X to change between brushing on the effect and removing it. I can jump in and start specifying where I want these waves to cross over. So I can start just brushing away here, like that. Maybe down here on the leg, I can brush that on. I want to go through here. X, I'll just sharpen up that edge a bit. Up the top here, I'll brush this on. X, I'm just going to erase some of that. Brush all that on. So you can see how I've created the effect of these lines now running over the body, but only weaving it out, like it's wrapping around the subject. So this is probably the part that I love the best about this action, is spending a bit of time brushing on where I want that effect to appear. So just remember that if you want these waves to completely wrap over your subject, then hide this mask, hold down Shift, click on it. Hide this entire layer, not the mask, and that way it wraps over your entire subject. And if you want to remove all those lines, hold down Shift and click on that mask. So then it kind of, I'll zoom out here, then it sits behind your subject, but it still creates a cool look because you can see all those lines growing out the back and uses all the colors, so that's pretty cool. Now this top folder here, Wavelength, this one's really important because, the mask of that folder, is because we can specify, we can brush on or remove the effects entirely. So if I hit B on the keyboard, grab a black brush, I can remove all the waves like that. And by default, when the action's finished, it usually leaves a little bit of motion blur past the area that we define. So you can see, if I zoom in a bit here, you can see around an arm here and a feet that there's a little bit of motion blur. So all you need to do is select the wavelength mask, grab a soft brush or hard brush, it doesn't matter, and just start brushing away where you don't want the effect to appear. Alright, I'm just going to turn that mask back on. Okay, so just look around the edges of your design and any unwanted motion blur, just use that mask to get rid of. Okay, just going to zoom out. Okay, so next is the adjustments folder. So after you've played around with all the settings here, you can jump inside here and you've got all these color options, there's 20 of them, and the way these work is that you just click the eye for that folder, like that, and I've just set up 20 different color options, so you can just go down the line and turn them on, see how it affects the look. That one looks pretty good, so I might keep that, but you don't have to use the effect at 100%. You could select the folder, change the opacity to maybe 66%, and then you can turn on other folders as well, so you can start building a color look. So I'll just go down the bottom here, Might use just a little bit of that. Go back up the top. Now I might use a little bit of that. Now these top three layers, you've got overall saturation, so I can double click on that one and turn up the saturation. Overall brightness, you can play around with the overall brightness of your design. Just like that. Might make it, it's probably good as it is. Increase contrast, and in brackets I've got opacity again, so again, hover over opacity, drag to the left and right. You can increase the opacity over the entire design. Just like that. Alright, now if you want to export this design with a transparent background, or you want to export the waves with transparency, just hide the background layer like that, and then you can export it like that, or you can then hide the original cutout, so then you can just export the waves on a transparent background. Okay, now I'm just going to hide that. Turn that back on. Now another little trick, or what you can do with some text, if I hit T to the text tool out, and I'm just going to type in a word here. I'll just type waves. Oops, I'll bring this up and see what I'm doing. I can then scale this up. So what I want to do now is I want this text to appear like it's behind some of these waves. So what I can do is grab this mask here. I'm going to grab that mask and apply it to this waves layer. So if I just hold down Alt or Option on a Mac and click on that mask and drag it down to waves, you'll see now that I've applied that same mask to waves. So I can scale this up and it will still sit behind all those lines. But what I want to do now is I want these lines that are sitting over the top to be semi-transparent. So I can double click on this mask and just turn the density down a little bit. So now I can clearly see the outline of the letters, and it just makes it look like the lines just have a bit of, not as dense. Okay. Now what I might also do is, or what you can do is turn the unmasked lines on. So you get all these additional lines, right? But I want to control where those lines appear. Like at the moment there's way too much going on, especially through this area here, but it looks really cool around the subject here, like these additional white lines, these white lines here that taper off. So what I'm going to do is turn these all off, and I'm going to turn them on one by one. I'll turn this one on. Now what I might do is apply a mask to this layer. So right down the bottom here, I'm just going to click that, applies a mask. I'm going to invert that mask, so I'm going to hide it all. It's all hidden. Now with a white brush, I can brush on where I want that to appear. So I'm just going to use a soft brush, and I'm going to change the opacity of the brush to about 50%. So if I just hit 5 on the keyboard, if you look up the top here, you see it currently it's 99%, the brush. If I hit 5, changes it to 50%, so it's much softer. So now I can start brushing on those additional lines. And if I want to preview all those lines back on again, I can just hold down Shift on that mask and click on it to hide it. So now I can get an overview of where all those lines appear again. So I'm just scanning around my subject here where some additional lines can look cool. So I'm going to turn that mask off. B to get the brush out again. I'm just going to brush on those extra lines around here. And there's a couple up here that look pretty cool. Just like that. Now I'm going to turn on this other one. Again, I'm going to use the same technique. I'm just going to apply a mask. I'm going to invert it, hit B, white brush, and start brushing on those extra lines. Get to overlap with that text a bit. Looks pretty cool. try this one. It's probably a bit too much now. It's pretty good. Now I'm just going to go back and fine tune where the effect intersects with our those weave points. The way that's not that smooth there, so I'm going to select my original cutout mask. Grab a undo that. Zoom in a bit here. Oops. Change the opacity of this brush back to 90. Create smoother curves here. Might create just one going through here. Brush on a bit more here. Alright, I think that's looking pretty good. So what I want to do now is just do some final fine tuning. So if I select this top folder, adjustments, and if I hit, so what I want to do, I want to put everything that I see on the screen onto one layer, so I can make some adjustments to that. So to do that, just hold down Control Shift Alt E or Command Shift Option E on a Mac. And what it's done is you can see now it's merged everything that you see onto one layer. So now I can play around with this. So if I go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, there's a few settings we can play around here to fine tune the design. So you've got this one here, temperature slider. So I can quickly adjust the if I want to make it cooler or hotter. So I might make it cooler. You can add a tint. That. The exposure looks pretty good. Contrast, I'll play around with that. So what I do here is I just grab that middle handle and I swivel it back and forward. Just gives me an idea if it looks better with less contrast or more. So just a little bit more highlights. It's probably good as is. Shadows. Look at there, the whites, the blacks. Clarity is like sharpening, so if I just crank this all up to 100%, you can see it's added quite strong sharpening. If you put it to 0, it sort of adds like a diffuse glow effect. But I'm going to slowly bring this to the right, add a bit of sharpening. Vibrance, a bit like saturation, and just increase the saturation of the colours. There's saturation there. Okay, that's pretty good. And so what I like to do then, because I've applied all these effects to one layer, I can turn that layer on and off to preview before and after. So it clearly, or to me, looks a lot better. Contrast is good, colours look good. So what I want to do now is add some really fine sharpening to this design. So to do that again, what I can do here is just duplicate this layer, hit Control J, and go to Filter Other High Pass. Select the radius, put it to 2. And I'm going to set this blend mode to hard light. I'm going to adjust this opacity, bring it to 0, just bring it up just a fraction. I mean, you won't notice a difference here. This is like super fine tuning. So just make sure those lines look really sharp, which they do. Alright, so I'm all done here. That's really all there is to the action. I'm sure you can think of other ways to utilise the effect. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to group all this, preview before and after. Alright, so if you're having issues with the action or want some tips, just email me and I'll help you out. But if not, have fun using it. Thanks.